We've got a packed hour coming up for you, so you don't want to move anywhere. It's going to be a good one. Let's get straight on with it then, shall we? Robert Jenrick claims the Conservative Party is over as he compares Kemi Badenoch's odds of becoming the next Prime Minister to that of the Green Party leader. Have a listen.
Kemi has as much chance of being our next Prime Minister as Zach Polanski. It's not going to happen. The choice is Starmer or goodness knows who else, or Nigel.
It follows Kemi Badenoch's shock sacking of the former Shadow Justice Secretary after evidence of his defection was uncovered. Speaking to GB News yesterday, Robert Jenrick said trust and credibility within the Tory party had completely gone. This all comes as rumours of turmoil within the Labour Party grow. I know, do keep up. With Keir Starmer reportedly being urged to sack West Streeting over the Health Secretary's brazen and brutally honest media appearances. So you're sacking someone for being honest, right? OK, get it. Now, following Robert Jenrick's comments in today's You Decide poll, we're asking, is Britain broken? I'm not shocked by this, I have to admit. 97% of you say yes, while 3% just say no. OK, now, joining me now, I think speaking for the first time about the situation, is Head of Policy at Reform UK, Zia Yusuf. Zia, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Zia, first question is, how are you feeling today? It's been a pretty seismic week for Reform.
Been a huge week for Reform. Look, what's really interesting is Kemi Badenoch has the audacity to claim that Britain is not broken. 97% of GB News viewers totally disagree with that. I disagree with that. Robert Jenrick said that she needs to get out more. I totally agree with that statement. Look, let's look at the facts. 12 million people imported over 14 years under a Tory government after they lied repeatedly and said that they would reduce immigration. Over 100,000 people have turned up on our beaches, most of them military-aged men from countries that hate us, without our permission. Look at the economy. Real wages for British people have done almost nothing, have been stagnant for a decade. Taxation at the highest level since World War II. The NHS, 6 million people waiting on elective waiting lists still, and 19,000 people last year waited more than 3 days in accident and emergency. If that is not broken, I don't know what is. And the only reason why Kemi Badenoch cannot admit that Britain is broken is because that would mean she would have to admit that she and her party broke it. I will say this, though, on that point, that the country is not broken irreparably. That's the good news. That's why Nigel's in politics, why I'm in politics. Reform not only can repair that damage, we can take Britain to new heights.
Zia, the problem is with what's happened this week and Robert Jenrick joining your party is he was in government that was responsible for a lot of the problems you've just pointed out. You've never been a fan, and you've never hidden the fact, because you do speak honestly, you've never hidden the fact that you're not Robert Jenrick's number one fan. How's this going to work out between the two of you now?
Yeah, look, I have articulated my views, and people know what those views historically were, but I had dinner with Robert on Thursday night, the evening that he defected. This is a thoughtful man. We discussed lots of different things, and he's someone who I think is clear-eyed about the damage the Tory party did to this country, and he wants to help Nigel, he wants to help Reform, he wants to help all of us at Reform turn this great country around. And I want to say this too, that look, if we want to see a country which has secure borders, that isn't routinely humiliated, that has proper law and order, if we want to see every illegal migrant deported from this country, then we must win the next general election. And I think any objective observer could not argue against the notion that Robert Jenrick joining Reform makes it more likely that we win the next general election, which is a crucial milestone in turning this great country around.
Zia, one of the problems many people have who are watching us today is the way Robert Jenrick left the Conservative Party. That's a party he'd been a member of since he was 16 years old. He was really ready to throw many of his former colleagues under the bus, indeed stab them not just in the back but in the chest as well. Now, he is going to be a key member of your party.
This interruption is brought to you by ExpressVPN and their New Year deal. New Year, new VPN, and a huge saving of up to 80% if you act now. You're busy planning how to get in shape, but the hackers are planning how to get into your accounts. ExpressVPN locks down your connection so you can start the year protecting your data. So scan the QR code or click the link in the description now.
So you think that leopard has changed his spots? You 100% now trust Robert Jenrick?
I do. And look, to that point, I understand why people might say, oh, there's different styles to do it. You know, Jenrick's defection speech was very different, for example, to Danny Kruger's. But again, as you just said, I think the British people want to hear people speak honestly. And it is my assessment that Robert Jenrick was articulating what was in his heart and the feelings that he has had about some of those colleagues. I mean, can you imagine, by the way, sitting in meetings, listening to a bunch of people who broke the country, have the arrogance and the audacity to say that they should finger wag at the British people and tell them that the country isn't broken? So again, look, I understand why there'll be different perspectives and people have different styles. Robert is very much the sort of comes from the more street fighter camp, I would say, of politics, probably some more similar in style, perhaps to me than someone to Danny. But look, again, I respect the notion. I do think he's being sincere about his views about his colleagues inside the Tory party.
Unfortunately, the voters don't appear to agree with you. 60% of voters, including 30% of Reform voters, think that Robert Jenrick and many of the other ex-Conservatives who have joined Reform are doing it for their own careers, not for the good of Reform, not for the good of the country. What would you say to them?
Well, what I'd say is, in the end, this is a multi-year journey now to the next general election, and the voters are going to have to judge all of us, including Nigel, obviously, at that point. And then again, hopefully we win, and then they can judge us again at the next general election. That's the nature of politics. Look, inevitably, if a high-profile figure defects from one party to another, every single headline is just going to be about somebody defecting, which in and of itself is not appealing at all, obviously, to British voters who, as I just outlined, are struggling. But again, I will say this. It is a really important moment for the centre-right of British politics. And I want to point out one more thing, actually, which we haven't covered, which Nigel also said at that press conference about May the 7th, which obviously at that point, the drawbridge will be raised. I think I'm paraphrasing Nigel there. So I think that's important too. What I would say, let me just repeat this, right? Let me be crystal clear. Reform will secure our borders, deport every single illegal migrant in this country, restore British pride in our traditions, in our culture, get rid of the rampant wokery that has riddled our civil service, bring back law and order in this country, do all of the things that GB News viewers and the British public, I think, en masse want. And in order to do that, we must win the next general election. And there just isn't space for two centre-right parties in this country.
So do you think this is the end of the Conservative Party?
I think it's a big step. Look, my view is that the Tory party will end up becoming some sort of provincial country club, a bit like what the Lib Dems have become. And I think that's probably where we are headed. Under a first-past-the-post system, it is extremely unforgiving for political parties under 25%. There's no sign the Tories are going to ever get back close to that again. So, look, we take nothing for granted. We're going to continue to fight for every vote in May. That is incredibly important. And I'd encourage everybody who is still bestowed with the privilege by Keir Starmer and Tory councillors of actually getting a vote in May. But if you have a vote in May, don't underestimate how important. I think it's the most important set of local elections in this country's history. So please do go out and vote for Reform.
Yeah, if you're allowed to, indeed. Zia, finally, one quick question. There's a lot of big beasts at the top of Reform now, yourself included, obviously Richard Tice, Lee Anderson and Nigel himself. Lots of people are predicting infighting, as we've seen with the Conservatives, we're currently seeing with Labour as well. Could be a problem for your party going forward. What would you say to that?
Yeah, this is all sort of Tory-coded stuff because people are so used to, I get it, if you're a political journalist and you love intrigue and palace intrigue, then that's what happened with the Tory party, right? No senior people could ever work with each other. If you were a Tory Prime Minister, you lasted about 5 minutes, and most of the time all of your colleagues around the cabinet table were plotting against you in real time inside cabinet meetings. So I understand why people think that. Look, the group of us had dinner just a couple of nights ago. And as I said, we got a great working relationship. And I want to say this too. We are still procuring the talent that we need at Reform. That's what makes Reform very, very different. I built a startup, right? And the nice thing about a startup, when people join a startup, there are so many big, if the startup's successful and it grows into an international organization, then there are so many big roles to go. And that's very much where Reform is. So I would not pay any attention to all of those palace intrigue rumours because they're just not true.
OK. And Zia, would you ever expect Kemi Badenoch to join your party? Would she be welcome?
Well, based on what she's claiming about, she's called us rogues, she's called us liars. I mean, what's really interesting, right, is that we keep hearing from her that she wouldn't do a pact, and yet lots of other very prominent Tories, people like Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, etc., and many others have been imploring for a pact for a very long time. I defy you to name a single Reform figure that has talked about a pact. There won't be a pact, and I think I can safely say and reassure people that Kemi Badenoch will not be joining the Reform Party.
But Jacob's potential?
No, I make no secret of the fact. I think Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg is a credibly intelligent, high-integrity man. I consider him a friend. I think he's a brilliant guy. But I feel like he's got Tory blood flowing through his veins. Maybe you can talk him round.
Well, I'll give it a go. Zia, finally, Nigel made a big point of saying that somebody from the Labour Party would be joining you. West Streeting?
No, I could categorically deny that we've been in discussions with West Streeting to join Reform, or Angela Rayner, for that matter.
Give us a clue then, go on.
No, look, we've spoken, and this is the other thing, when people look at defections and take their views on them and they say, oh, is there anyone you wouldn't take? People don't see the vast majority of the people we have spoken to, including generates people coming to us, to at least, to engage in conversations. We don't take for lots of different reasons. But Nigel's been clear. He only wants people who add. And, he's also now set a deadline, which I think also hopefully will reassure people.
Shabana Mahmood?
No, absolutely not.
Not going to give up. Zia, thank you so much for...
You can rattle off the entire list of Labour names, but I think people might get bored.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time as well. Zia, thank you very much for joining me. That's Head of Policy at Reform UK, Zia Yusuf there. Thank you very much. Speaking, I think, for the first time about his relationship with Robert Jenrick. Interesting times ahead.